Yeah, good morning everybody, and thanks for being here so early today, and thanks to the organizers of Creative Morning for inviting me to speak here today. I'm going to speak about a special preference for a very special letter that I have, and you might have heard about it already because I'm not keeping it a secret. It is the letter eszett, which I think is a very beautiful letter. And I know that some people don't agree on that one, and that they say it might be a little ugly. And to be honest, in some cases it actually is, like in that one from Franklin Gothic, which looks like something fell on it, or it has sort of a disease. And it sometimes makes me think of this dog, which was elected ugliest dog in 2010. Yes, there is a competition for ugliest dog. And I mean, there are some similarities here, right? So when I did some handwritings, I noticed that actually the shape of a handwriting eszett is very close to a heart, and that illustrates quite well what I feel for this letter. And if the letter would have a logo, I think it could look like this, you know, being a heart-shaped eszett. So every language does have its own special letters, which refer to a special sound that language has, and sometimes they have a very special appearance. And in German language, as Jürgen just said, this letter is the letter eszett. So I'm a type lover. Some people might even say I'm a type nerd, which I take as a compliment. I just like type. I like the curves and I like the shapes of letters. And I mean, if it comes to the letter eszett, that's actually a very beautiful letter. It has the perfect shapes and curves. So it is a very beautiful letter, very graceful, very manifold as well, very elegant. And it is a letter that I think it is just underestimated. So that is the only reason why I like it so much. And the other reason is that it is part of my last name, and that actually means a lot of trouble. It basically means living with a typographical problem for all my life. And I remember my cousin calling it a triple S when we were kids. I mean, she has the last name as I have, and I think this is not politically correct, but it actually illustrates quite well what the problem of this letter is. And I'm not the only one. There are a lot of family names in Germany containing the letter eszett. That's not all of them, it's just some of them. But as you see, there are a lot of names having an eszett in it, and not even to mention the city names that have it. So I'm aware of the fact that this all is a little bit nerdy, and at some point I even, you know, made earrings out of it because I thought it's so beautiful. I'm wearing them today. And I started to judge fonts by the way their eszett looks. And I kept annoying my friends with that, but that actually makes them to give me little presents like that, like the one in the left corner, which I got from a very good friend. And she said, I saw this in a little store and it looked so beautiful, and it reminded me of you, so I just had to buy it. Or another friend sending me a postcard from Thailand saying, see, this is the Thai eszett. And I'm pretty sure there's no such thing as a Thai eszett, but it doesn't matter. It's just something very nice to see. And it's also very nice to see that my friends sort of accepted this little thing I have. So let me give you some examples of what it means to have this letter in your last name. Sometimes it just cannot be displayed. It sort of, you know, gets lost. Sometimes it gets very cryptical. Sometimes it's just decoded in the wrong way, which actually means some trouble with the parcel guy sometimes. Sometimes it gets misinterpreted as a German B, as Jürgen just said, which happens especially international-wise. And the funny thing about that one is that this also happens the other way around. Like in that case, when two very similar typefaces are mixed into one, that actually means fast food restaurant for the not German-speaking people here. So when it came to the point that I had to graduate from design school, I wanted to do something that, you know, tells the stories I have experienced and tells my opinion, and also gives the letter a better image. So I thought of making a book out of it, and when I started to work on it, people were like, can you make a book about one letter? I mean, one letter? And I was like, yes, you can. I mean, I did it. So let's go back into history a little here. The eszett came The origin of the eszett is a ligature, which is a connection of two or more letters that is used to avoid gaps in setting. And I think ligatures are a very beautiful thing in typography. I mean, two letters getting connected, how romantic is that? Isn't it beautiful? So what is undeniable is that the left part of the letter is a long S. The long S was used in German language for quite some time in parallel to the short S. It was used as an initial sound of a syllable, while the short S was used as a final sound. And for our eyes being used to reading Roman type, that actually looks a bit odd, but this rule is a fixed part of black letter writing. So whenever it comes to black letter writing, you have to use that rule, because otherwise it's just wrong. And these two type styles caused a lot of discussions about what is the right type style to use in Germany, and that took for like almost 2 centuries, and it ended in 1941 when the Nazis decided to get rid of black letter writing, because international-wise it was not easy to read, only the Germans knew how to read it. And I'm telling you all that because that is important for the history and for the understanding of the letter eszett. So what is very clear is that in black letter writing, the letter comes from a long S on the left side and a Z with a descender on the right side. There's lots of proof for that in old books. So it's not that clear when it comes to Roman type, where the left part, of course, is a long S, but the right part seems to be a short S. And there's some old books that have this kind of ligature, but that's not German books, that's Italian books, and they don't have anything to do with German language. So they clearly seem to have more aesthetical reasons. And until 1996, we were using that rule for handling the eszett that said the eszett only had to be used at the end of a syllable, but in 1996, with the orthography reform, we went back to what actually is an old rule from the 18th century, and it says that after a short vowel you have to use a double S, and after a long vowel or double vowel you have to use eszett. And that actually, I think, is a very easy rule to use, because it's very clear and it's so much easier for children and foreigners to learn it. And sometimes I get asked by people if I'm a little sad because that rule reduces the usage of the eszett. And actually I'm not, because it's so much easier and clearer to understand. And if you want people to use a letter right, there must be a rule that's easy to understand, and that rule actually is one. The black letter and the black letter eszett and the Roman type eszett conflicted all the time, because whenever something was written in black letter and said in Roman type, there was the question, how should the eszett look like, and also the other way around. And at some point it was even discussed to get rid of the eszett, as I think it was all the time discussed to get rid of the eszett. And it was also discussed to have a long S, short S ligature in black letter, which is totally weird. And it didn't make it into black letter. And to make things even worse, the long S got abolished from Roman type at the end of the 18th century. So a huge mess with this letter. A huge mess with this letter. A lot of questions, actually, because no one really knew how to handle it. And as we are in Germany and we like rules and regulations, we like to have things clear, we made a rule for the letter eszett as well. So in 1879, there was sort of a competition in a type-related magazine called Journal für Buchdruckerkunst, and printers and typesetters were asked to send in their proposals for what they think should be the right shape of the eszett. And that shape down here, or that shape here, that did win the competition. It's called Sulzbacher Form, because that is the name of the city where it was seen first or used first. But the printers and typesetters were like, oh no, we don't like the shape, we keep using the other shape as well. So they also kept using that shape of the eszett. And at this point it was already known that a capital eszett is missing. I mean, clearly there was only this one letter and it needed a capital letter as well. And the reason for that is that in black letter writing, as you can see here, uppercase lettering is just impossible. there was no uppercase writing in black letter, and black letter uppercase lettering is something that came up in the 1950s, 60s with the big billboards and ads, where it was used to make distinctions. And in black letter writing, there was no, as I said, no uppercase lettering, and no word even started with an eszett, so there was not really a need for it. But there were early suggestions for this letter, and typesetters knew something is missing here. The problem just remained unsolved, and it got postponed until some later point. And I think no one really knew that it would be like 100 years later, but yeah. So, as I just said, the lowercase eszett does have a long history and a very tricky one as well. And that is the reason why this letter came up with such a huge variety of shapes. All these shapes are more or less right. You could use them all if you wanted to. These three are the most common ones that we're using today. And of course, in living in Berlin, we know this one from Berlin street signs because it is an elementary part of the street signs in Berlin. And this leads to situations like that, that you have the same word written in two different styles on the same corner of a street, which is not wrong. It's just two ways of using the letter and handling the phoneme. And I was very happy to see that the new typeface for the Berlin airport that opens in June is using that shape of eszett, which clearly refers to Berlin street signs. And also I think it's a very beautiful shape. Anyways, I'm very happy to see type designers using alternate ligatures in their fonts, especially for the eszett, because you can do that with OpenType, and whenever a type designer does that, he totally gets me. I will buy the font. That is another sign, another shape from a house number here in Berlin Mitte, which sort of disconnects the ligature into two letters, which is also quite interesting. And IKEA, in its own font, sort of handwriting font for their for the signs in the shops, is using the long S, short S thing. And that is something interesting I found on the internet from a Dutch type designer who was looking for a way to show a small cap eszett, which not existed. So he found his own way to expressing that this should be an eszett in the name, which I think is kind of interesting. I mean, why not? Yeah, when it comes to capital eszett, the creativity does not stop. Whenever people want to use it, they seem to find their ways to use it, as you can see here. I mean, clearly someone wanted to use the data and it did not exist, so we're taking something that is already there. And the reason for that is very clear because, as I just said, in the orthography rules say that after a short vowel you have to use double S, and when it comes to uppercase lettering, of course, you also have to use double S. But they also say after a long vowel you use eszett, and when it comes to uppercase lettering, this rule just gets suspended because there is no capital eszett and you have to use double S, and that's kind of weird. So that's why you find a lot of stuff like that, which is called uppercase lettering by choice. That means that people want to use the eszett in uppercase lettering, and since there is no capital eszett, they just use the normal one. That's actually one of my favorite pictures because there's another mistake in it. Yeah. Someone really has issues with the S phonemes here. So I have a lot of examples that illustrate quite well that people want to use it because it just makes the word more clear, and they are very interesting sometimes. And yeah, a trouble-making letter and a trouble-making project. Oh, that is also a very beautiful one. I mean, this looks like the eszett is the most important letter in that word. So, and here you can see why it's also called German B, because someone wanted to use the eszett, and he clearly found his own way to do so. A while ago, an official capital eszett was released and was introduced, which, for someone like me, having to deal with typographical disasters like that all my life, that is something I actually really do like. I know, I know that, as Jürgen just said, there's a lot of discussions about it, and I'm not going to go too much into detail here because that's actually an extra talk, but I'm very happy about it. I got my first official invoice this week having a capital eszett, and that made me very happy. So, yeah, but when it came to the point that I was working, I started to work on my book, I needed a name for it, and I came up with the name eine scharfe Type. That is something that's not really easy to translate into English because it has a double meaning in German language that you don't get in English. But I will try to explain. The word scharfe refers to scharfes S because that is also a name that is used for it, or sharp S in English. And the word Type refers to letter or character, but in Germany it's also used for like strange persons or weirdos, and I mean that illustrates quite well what the eszett is within all the other letters. So I named the book eine scharfe Type, sort of a sharp character maybe. And what I did in the book is that I told my stories, that I told why I like type so much, why I like the letters so much. I spoke to people who are having the same problems, having the name as part of their family name, and you know, being at an airport somewhere in the southeast and not, you know, be able to enter the country because of that. And I have some infographics showing the different names of the letter, because wherever you go in Germany, people might use a different name for the letter, and that's very interesting because it has a lot of names actually. I spoke to programmers about why they do not like the eszett so much and any other special character. I'm having more infographics showing the beauty and the variety of shapes in it, and I'm explaining the orthography rules in a very easy way. I'm showing some images I collected over the years, like that one. That is actually a very cheap wine. It was like €1.50. I bought it and I never drank it, which I think was a very good idea. But I just like what they did with the eszett on the label, so it made it into the book as well. And of course, I'm showing the beauty of the data, giving it some space in it. And I collected some statements by famous designers and type designers, asking them what they think about the eszett and if they like it or not. And for instance, here's one from Eric Spiegelman saying that it is a very interesting letter to design and to use, which I think we agree on. So my aim is to have this book in bookstores at some point this year. Well, let's see where this is going. And yeah, that's the story about me and the eszett. Thanks for coming.